there. This is Della Rucker. Thank you so much for joining me today. I am the principal of the Wise Economy Workshop and author of the new book, The Local Economy Revolution Has Arrived. What's changed and how you can help. So we've done a little bit of a different setup today. I'm playing with lighting and cameras and all the stuff. And so we're working on trying to make it look a little bit better. I have to tell you that when you are 52 years old and you're trying to do this stuff, none of this equipment is like automatically really friendly to you. So, we gotta work with what we can work with here. I put on a green, it's sort of green. It's kind of like greenish blue shirt today. So, happy St. Patrick's Day to all of my Irish friends. I usually don't wear green on St. Patrick's Day because I'm not Irish. People assume that I am because I have red hair, but my people, my family history is of the folks that made life hard on the Irish. So I always feel like I'm sorry they were like not nice to you. So, but orange, just not a good deal. So we're going to go with the kind of greenish blue for today. Despite my sort of existential angst over St. Patrick's Day, today's actually been a pretty amazing day. Number one, I got the first vaccination. I got my first of the coronavirus vaccinations, and it was easier than a flu shot. I barely noticed the prick. In fact, I asked her, like, wait, you're done already? When I felt the Band-Aid. And it was, it's been no after effects for me, at least, whatsoever. Like less than a flu shot. So I've been, I am just thrilled for an extrovert. The past year of being, in splendid isolation, like for a lot of us, that gets pretty old. And I'm super excited to start to see the light at the end of the tunnel. So if you haven't gotten your vaccine and you're going to be eligible soon to get your vaccine, my experience with it, at least so far, has been fantastic. And I can't wait to be able to get back out and be with people and be with you guys and have some of the great conversations and the great experiences that I know we're all looking forward to. So that's to me is a wonderful piece of news for today. I've got some notes over here on the side that are now falling down. So second thing that's a piece of great news is that after a lot of machinations, I've been able to get the Building a Wise Economy podcast to work on Apple. So on Apple Podcasts, Apple has a separate setup than pretty much everybody else. And it didn't work for a while. So finally got that going. So if you are a podcast listener, like I know so many of us are, I think you'll really enjoy the conversations that I've been able to have on that podcast series. So again, it's the Building a Wise Local Economy podcast. Building a Wise Local Economy. You'll see my face, and I think you'll really enjoy it. So that podcast is available, and it features the Accelerate Us series that I've been doing kind of these really long form, but really, really fascinating conversations with people that you might not have ever encountered otherwise. And so those are now all available on SoundCloud, on Spotify, on Stitcher, and on Apple. So pick it up wherever you listen to your podcasts and enjoy. And make sure you give me feedback, because the most wonderful thing about that is when I can share feedback with one of the people that I've done an interview with and say, hey, this person reached out to me and they really loved what they heard from you about this, or you helped them solve that problem, or something like that. So your feedback is not only good for my ego, which is not inconsiderable, but it's also great for these people that, I have a chance to talk to through that series. And those are people who are very often fighting their way through the trenches every day without sometimes a whole lot of acknowledgement. So you can really make a world of difference for them by listening and sending them your props. So Accelerate Us is kicking off again in the near future. I put a hold on it last fall to kind of play with the formatting a little bit. I did an Accelerate Us interview as a live stream on this channel on Monday with Kemal Alcantara, who has been working on developing the Trep House Superhub platform for Black, Brown, and underrepresented entrepreneurs and small business owners. So that was a fascinating conversation that is in production right now. So we'll have that available on YouTube and also on those podcast platforms in the very near future. I would say within a week or two. So those are kind of really exciting things that are going on. Another is that the Substack has been picking up subscribers. So for me, the Substack is a way to really get very deeply into kind of the current events and the sort of the day-to-day unfolding of how this local economy revolution is happening on the ground in communities all over the country and soon all over the world. And it's a much more flexible format than trying to write something in a book that immediately becomes out of date. So I've wanted to do that for years. The Substack platform finally gives me a way to do that. It is unique and different content from anything else that I produce. And if you're interested in really seeing how the big principles that we talk about in the local economy revolution have arrived, if you really want to see how that's playing out in reality, I think you'll absolutely love that Substack. And it's, cheaper than the cup of coffee you might have had this morning. Certainly cheaper than the one I had after my shot. It was like a celebration. So you can find that at wiseeconomy.substack.com. So Wise Economy, one word, all run together, wiseeconomy.substack.com. And there's more details there. So that's something that I'm also really excited about. And we're starting to book talks and presentations and podcasts about this book. So I'm currently working on getting a couple scheduled that I think I'll be able to announce to you soon. And I'm really super looking forward to that. It's a whole lot of fun, right? And it's fun to be able to have those conversations about these big issues with people instead of just, standing here talking to a camera. But I'm glad to be able to do that as well. So with all of that sort of news out of the way, today we have been working our way through the first principles, which are like the underlying sort of ground rules or fundamental characteristics of the moment that we're in as a transition between the industrial economy, the industrial era world, not just of making things, but of how we think and how we organize our organizations and our communities. We're in the transition from that world to a future world that has lots of different names right now. I've taken to calling it the fusion era because I think that helps us picture it as something that's very profoundly different from what we've come from and what most of us have grown up in and kind of really internalized as our way of doing things. So today I'm going to read from the Local Economy Revolution, and I'm going to give you one of the more challenging pieces in some respects. one of the more challenging of the first principles, because on the surface it looks very simple, but when we really get into it and think about it, it becomes much more problematic and much more challenging to us, particularly those of us who create designs, who create projects, who create buildings and urban spaces. It's not about buildings or spaces or even really about economics. It's about people. We know that. We know, but we don't. We say that we're building a street or a program or a product for people. But too often, our plans don't do what we intended them to do, or they don't fix what we intended them to fix. But we pretend we don't see that, and we move on to the next one. Part of the reason why this is so difficult is that we hold regular people at arm's length from the process of creating, when they could potentially make it much more effective in the real world. But more importantly, and more problematically, we end up loving the thing more than the people. We say that we are designing and building our thing for the people of our community, but we get wrapped up in, we obsess over, and we fall in love with the thing that we've built, with its supposed beauty, its simplicity, its ideas, its materials. We can easily do that, whether it's business ideas or architecture and urban design or historic preservation or even public policy. Why? For the same reason that we use babies and puppies to sell products. Because it's easier to love the simple, the unambiguous, the not yet compromised, than it is to love messy, complicated, not always predictable people, or places made for and by people, or to let those unwashed mess up our masterpiece. But when we make our work about something other than people, when we fall in love with the thing that we made ostensibly to help them, we shouldn't be surprised when our creations make the lives of people we thought we were helping worse instead of better. Again, we've done that a lot during our industrial era upbringing as people and as professions. But we can't pretend anymore that we don't know any better. So let's unpack that just a little bit in the time that we have here. And you can hear some dogs adding their voices in the backgrounds, just in case you're wondering. So what is it that actually happens in these contexts? So people are hard, they're messy, they're difficult, and they're often contradictory, and they're confusing. And the projects that we make, whether it's a product, like a consumer product, or it's another piece of work in either the public realm or the private realm, a place, a plaza, a building, even a program, it's very typically projects stay within the boundaries of the thing that we made for them. If we've designed certain aesthetics, if we've established a budget, if we've established a certain purpose, they're going to stay there because it's a project, it's a thing, it's not a person. People can insult us, they can misunderstand our good intentions. You know, we had the best intentions, And sometimes they can drag our project away from what we intended. And we hate all of that. So people who have worked with me for a long time are familiar with a saying that I use a lot, which is scratch a planner, find a dictator underneath. That was actually one of the favorite footnotes belonging to my graduate school economics professor. So it's very easy for us to want to be a dictator, but insightful, prudent, benevolent dictators, they're super hard to come by. And frankly, most of us probably don't have that within us. So you don't have to be a designer to fall in love with your project. Every time we try to push a new initiative in the direction of our nonprofit, every time we create a tax incentive or try to use a tax incentive that is not necessarily beneficial and maybe is a little bit too much of a stretch, we run the risk of being that dictator, of loving the project more than the people. Love is a difficult word. Even in religious circles, love and what love means and what love requires people to do is a very intense subject of debate. And most religions are ostensibly built around love. So why would that be so difficult? And it's a difficult word for us to use because we don't want to talk about love within our professional or our intellectual context. But love, and some form of love, does seem to be what that transition from industrial era to fusion era is requiring of us who are playing a leadership role in our communities. So if you grew up in a Christian church, you might remember a passage that sounds something like this. Love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. It is not rude. It is not self-seeking. It keeps no record of wrongs. Now, you have to be a real saint to live up to all of that. And there ain't many of those that I know. Especially when the things that we're creating are coming up against real, complicated, scary, and scared people. But the fusion era that we're moving into, where those systems that we have become dependent on over the last 100 years kind of don't really hold water anymore. Ironically, that love business is a big part of what we have to do. If for no reason, then because the people of our communities are increasingly demanding to be honored, to be valued, to be participants, to be loved. So if you compare the development process today to that in the 1950s, you start to get a taste of what I mean. So the answer isn't to fight harder, to defend our project. That's a zero-sum game. And that's likely to work this time, perhaps, maybe next time, but not for the long term. And in the process, it will create more damage, more fear, more pain, and more cynicism, which ultimately blocks what we're trying to do. So leading a community and taking care of the places that we care about requires us to have a very different approach. Instead of treating our communities, instead of treating our projects rather, as this fait accompli, as this beautiful sort of Fabergé egg that we've made and that is lovely and that is perfect and that has all the right parts and that reflects the components that people told us about in the surveys that we did back 3 years ago. It's still it's a creation that is separated from the people who will have to live with it. And that is an extraordinarily deep challenge. So we have to shift from, the expert in the black robe approach that I've written and talked about so many times before. What we're really being called to do is to profoundly shift from a creator to a co-creator, to people who make solutions, make projects in partnership with the people who will be impacted. Now, that requires two things to be different. One is the technical approach that we take. And that's a matter of how we structure meetings and how we design the process and what the scope of work looks like and all of those kind of things. That's one piece. And that feels challenging to a lot of people, but it's also doable. There's a set of skills. There's a set of methods and techniques that we can apply. The bigger challenge is right up here. And it is making that mindset shift from an industrial era style, I am the expert, I come in and tell you what we're going to do, to I have expertise that I am sharing with you, and we are collaborating to develop a solution together. That's a fundamentally different approach. And if the mindset's right, people figure out and can learn how to do the technical aspects of creating that kind of experience. But without that mindset change, all we do sometimes is make it worse than it already was. So the good news is that it's easier than ever for people of a community to play an active role, to cut off a lot of the conflicts that we've seen over the years. We can cut those off. We don't have to play that same push me pull you game that we've played for so many years. Instead, what we have the ability to do is to connect. And we have the resources that we need to do that. We have the tools, we have the technology, we have the information. What we need is the mindset. And that is why In the Local Economy Revolution Has Arrived, I spend so much time focusing on that question of mindset, of understanding how deeply and fundamentally things have changed, and how deeply and fundamentally we have to change the fundamentals of our approach rather than just use a different program. So I hope that's helpful for you today. I think it opens up some enormous opportunities. And it gives us an opportunity, not only ourselves, but as a community, to channel our energy into a whole different direction. And that, to me, is the great excitement and the great opportunity of this fusion era that we're moving into. So, again, if you're interested in learning more, pick up this book, Local Economy Revolution Has Arrived, and join me on Substack at wiseeconomy.substack.com. And what I think we're doing is building a new way of taking care of our communities, whether we're professionals in some form or another, or we're people who do this out of love at the end of the day. And I think that's okay to say that we're doing it out of love for our community. It feels really messy. It feels weird and squishy, but say it a few times and it starts to feel pretty good. So thanks again for joining me today. I appreciate it. I had a couple of glitches with this setup, so we will work on that in the future, and we will arrange for little Miss Maple, the puppy, barking in the background to be somewhere else. I'll have to show you pictures of Maple next time. I think she's finally settled down now. She's adorably cute, but she has opinions. So thanks again for listening today. Thanks for taking the time to really be sort of sitting with and thinking about these issues. Sometimes it feels a little disconnected from the reality of I got to get this and that and that and that and that and something else done. But at the end of the day, what we're really about is making these big transitions and helping to create the communities that we want for our future. So thanks again. And if you're interested, you can learn more about all of the things that I talked about at wiseeconomy.com. Thanks.